the 23rd day of January 2023, 24. I'm trying to make it through January without screwing up. Every single year when we get to January, I got a tendency to repeat the last year's date, right? Almost done it this time, but so far so good. We're up to day 23. Still haven't screwed up. It's a bit of a stretch, Dana. Where am I to here? It always takes me a couple of seconds to get up to curb stomping speed. While you wait and consider clicking around a little tiny bit, maybe. Never hurts. Never hurts to try. We got a balmy. It's going to be a balmy minus 28 tonight. Wind chills, which is a minus 18 Fahrenheit, I guess, or something like that. This was a clip after I got arrested one time. I was out on a research expedition, and when I came ashore, they arrested me. Gave me gag orders.
All he said was it wasn't like a banana or a potato chip or walking in the sunshine. This is kind of severe punishment, isn't it?
That's what the nuclear industry does, right? When they don't know what else to do with you, they give you gag orders. Complete desperation, wasn't it? Let's quick boo at some of the stories we're going to cover tonight. Japan's Tepco tests drones. And nuclear meltdowns. Yeah, UK nuclear plant hit by a new multi-year delay. Could cost up to $35 billion. Multi-year delay. I think in Canadian dollars, say 2015 Canadian dollars, you're looking at $96 billion for 2 reactors. $96 billion. You know, they're so far away from getting it finished. Tack another 10 or 15 billion on top of that, right? Fukushima then and now, they got a bunch of pictures, and I don't know what to make of it. It's such low quality, we'll get after it. Supply risk fuels uranium flight to more than 16-year peak. There's no supply risk. What the hell are they talking about? Reactors are coming off line left, right, and center. Right? Sprott Physical Trust and Yellowcake Limited had bought up the physical uranium created at artificial demand. And so investors are buying on a Ponzi scheme. This is a Ponzi scheme. Nuclear hype and meltdown. That was a pretty funny article. They're making fun of the non-nuclear renaissance. We'll get to that. It's a great story. Quake recovery plans include focus on schools. There's still over 700 schools that are severely damaged, if not destroyed, in the Noto Peninsula. 700 schools. Heavy snow may complicate relief. They're expecting around 80 centimeters of snow up in the earthquake, where they've been abandoned now for 23 days. Every time I see this media here, NHK scumbag, I really get upset. I don't. After all the lies that he regurgitated, I know he doesn't write the lies. His job is just to sit there in front of the camera and sell the lie. But I really hate his guts every time I see him now. Liquefaction triggered by the Noto Peninsula earthquake. It was over 6,000 homes destroyed in Niigata, over by the Niigata prefecture. So 23 days later, why is that the first time we're hearing this? How many of them are very close to that nuclear power plant, I wonder? There's 3 people rescued from an island 50 kilometers off the peninsula. They lost power too out there, apparently, 50 kilometers off the coastline. UK commits another $800 million to a planned nuclear power plant. Like, that's such a low sum. That's almost an insult. But once again, we thank goodness they don't give more money, because it's such a scumbag industry. Train with the Nuclear Energy Agency. They want high school students to go train with a bunch of perverts. I think it's despicable. Ah, yes, Taiwan seeks to scrap the rules on nuclear power extensions, where they have to apply for the permit 5 years before the 40 years. So when a plant is 40 years old or 35 years old, they have to apply for an extension 5 years before it hits the 40-year age. We'll get to that story. 400 trapped around a nuclear plant for 8 days after the Noto quake. This was quite the scam article. We'll cover that one. Let's talking about Shika. Meet the morons, undergraduates in charge of a nuclear reactor. Literally meet the morons. These are first, second year students, third year students or something. And they're in charge of a small megawatt test reactor at this university. We've covered quite a few times over the years. Look at this dipshit. As soon as you look at this guy here, you know this is an asshole. There's no maybes about it. And then the despicable, always disgusting, sadistic Globe and Mail. The twisted, sadistic Globe and Mail. Little Nazis that they actually are. Says, ignore the noise. What noise? Camco Stocks, which is a uranium supplier, is a long-term buy. Why would it, reactors are going offline. We'll get to that. Whatever you do, for Christ's sakes, don't listen to the disgusting parasites, the sadistic monsters at the Globe and Mail. These are disgraceful, detestable, contemptible, reprehensionable, loathsome scum. Federal budget talks could endanger Holtec. This is Chris Singh. Every friggin' time we talk about Holtec and Chris Singh, you talk about absurd destruction to your country. Why is that creature in your country if it's not to destroy you and your water and your air and your land? Nuclear weapons waste disposal using waste isolation pilot plant will have a negligible impact. They said you're going to put 35 tons of plutonium where it's only supposed to be contaminated gloves and contaminated tools. And atomic scientists keep the doomsday clock at a minute and a half to midnight. First off, the atomic scientist is the industry itself. Right? This was created during the Manhattan Project, and it's if you look at the board of directors, they're the worst, the most loathsome, the most repulsive, the most freakish, double-dealing, just excretable, low-down, stinking, dirty, shady scum you're ever going to come across. Excuse the Canadian there. Let me touch up on last night's video, because that's always fun. Had to screw us over last night. Japan's earthquake was 2 hours, 11 minutes, 26 seconds. And then 12 hours later, as usual, the video gets longer or shorter. So it got 5 seconds shorter. So it would have got 11 seconds shorter. They added 6 seconds in and ended up as 5 seconds shorter. Because that's what we've been tracking this for a couple of years now, routine. We don't see that on anybody else's videos. My video's tendency to get 6 seconds longer 12 hours later. You can't read the comments for 12 hours. You can't download the video for 12 hours until the video is 6 seconds longer. But we noticed lately they've been chopping stuff out of my video. And then not yesterday, before video, was 2 hours, 5 minutes, 18 seconds. And 12 hours later, they chopped out 17 seconds. So if you're going to watch my videos, you should watch it in the first 12 hours. Because they're doing something to our videos, right? And this is the same group, of course.
What I'm standing is on top of what used to be.
This is the same group that are covering up the Fukushima Reactor 4, Reactor 3, Reactor 2, and Reactor 1 reactor core meltdowns and 8 fuel pool meltdowns. And this is just a handful of scumbag media pretending they're in the fuel pool of a building that don't even exist anymore. And the stump that they left there should have been razed right to the ground. We'll get to it. Tepco. At some point, the world hopefully will come to their senses and deal with Tepco. Japan's Tepco tests drones, and Tepco is supposed to be, it's an acronym, so it should be in capital letters, not like a word. Japan's Tokyo tests drones for wrecked nuclear plant in a decommissioning first. Decommissioning. You can't decommission a nuclear meltdown with some tiny little drones that can fit in your hand, scumbags. Look at them. They got them in there taking pictures, and they're nowhere near the reactor, trust me. The drone is set to be deployed to the wrecked. Have you seen pictures of this so-called wrecked? Does that look like it's wrecked, or does it look like it's completely gone to anybody? It's going to be deployed the drones. What the frig is the drones? But like, first off, I can't see how it can survive near the fuel. It's not right. There's no electronics can survive in that environment, and this thing will fit in your palm of your hand. Of course, they're not in Fukushima prefecture, let alone at the nuclear plant. As part of an ongoing decommissioning, why is that a news story though? Look at these morons. And then this robot is going to do what? Like what the idea, apparently, according to these imbeciles, is they're going to put a pipe into Fukushima and they're going to send a robot in the pipe so they can get footage. Because after 13 years, they still can't get footage because everything dies right away. But first off, we've had many accidents in the past. So how come MIT and Harvard and Yale, Stanford, Oxford, all the shakers and movers institutions hasn't developed a robot? In fact, the high school students in Japan a few years back, we were covering stories of where they're developing robots to go into Fukushima. Like, this industry is your curse. It's a curse upon 8 million species, upon your current and present and future and every other species. This is an abomination of humanity, is nuclear. It shouldn't exist. You can't contain the emissions, and the emissions never go away. The drones in a snake-shaped robot will be dispatched to survey a damaged reactor. I'd like to dispatch a few of these disgusting parasites. Did I mention we got a poll tonight? Should nuclear scientists work at Fukushima nuclear meltdown instead of the homeless? Because this is why they're using the drone, because the homeless are there and they're dropping dead everywhere. So, let's try some drones, George. Well, we got to check with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission when they come back from vacation next year. We had 26 votes, and the majority of people said yes. But who the freak would say no? Oh, nuclear scientists. That's right. I can always feel the chill in the air, and they're going to have to leave the water running. Now he's going to get down to minus 28. Like, a minus 28 is the wind chill, right? But trust me, that wind chill gets into your house and gets into your bones. Almost 13 years after his core melted down and triggered one of the worst nuclear disasters in history. This is not one of the worst nuclear disasters, you sack of shit. This is the worst disaster. We've never had 2 reactors melting down at the same time. Fukushima had 4. They were changing fuel at reactor 4, that building there, which meant at least 3/4 or a minimum half of the reactor core was still in the reactor. You don't take all the fucking fuel out. Here we go again tonight. You don't take all the reactor fuel out when you're changing fuel, which meant that it had 2 to 3/4 of the reactor core was still in it. The fuel pool was full of plutonium-laden fuel rods. It was stuffed. Both of the fuel pools were stuffed because you don't have a repository, which means there's around 10 reactor cores at the top of each of the buildings. Well, there was. 13 years after his core melted down and triggered one of the worst nuclear disasters. There's like, each of these buildings is worse than all nuclear meltdowns combined worldwide. And so every time I hear that, I find that very offensive. And these people deserve to be held accountable for being degenerate scum manipulating the population with this so-called social engineering. So this was a cement truck that they brought in way after everything burnt off to manipulate the consensus, right? But this cement truck is for pumping, very viscous cement. It's not for pumping water. And so they hooked the hose up to it. Like a normal reactor needs 4,500 tons a minute. Think of 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks every minute. And you gotta sort out the keys. They really appreciate what we're talking about. Look at the jaws on this guy. What the hell, man? Looks like he got shot in the fucking mouth or something. This is the first time that a drone will be used to conduct an inspection. That's some creepy shit, man. That must be some Yakuza or something. Oh, project manager. He's the guy who beats up all the homeless, I guess. They don't show a picture of him lower because he has a stick in his hands with notches in it from all the homeless that he slaughtered. The first time that a drone will be used to conduct an inspection. Jesus, boy. Well, see, that's not true, right? They flew a drone over it on day 3. Right? We all have seen the videos on day 4. They flew with drones over and over and over many years. Hang on. It just drives me nuts. That's okay. It's a Tuesday. Tuesdays are good days to be drove nuts. What's the chances I'm going to find that tonight? Somebody sent me that. I think it was Joey sent me. Just see if I can get lucky enough to find it. No, not looking good. Don't give up on me yet. It should have been in my big pile. I probably put it over there, but I would have kept a copy. I just gotta try. Hang on. Yeah, I can't. Doesn't look good. I must have put. Hopefully, I'll have to go look for that later on. I know I got the videos right there. I only got one more to check. Might as well check that. Well, that was a total failure. I actually have drones from just right after drone footage. Okay, I'll give up. I'm sorry. Just let me check one more spot. I don't see it under F. Blip, blip, blip. One more try. Okay, I'll give up. I'm sorry. Ooh. That's pretty pathetic, Dana. Don't mind waiting if you can find it. Of the first floor nuclear reactor, time about number 1 reactor, folks. Of the first floor of the nuclear reactor's containment vessel, there is no containment vessel at reactor 1, 2, 3, or 4, period. This is not up for debate. Look at these morons, these human traitors. So we make sure to carry out the survey with a safety-first mindset. Like, what the frig are you talking about? You're sending in a little tiny drone. Not the homeless like you do every other day. You're sending in a drone. I think media should be dealt with severely in the near future if possible. A curling iron up their butts or something. Checking in procedures instructions one by one and ensuring safety at all time. First off, no one's building scaffold inside of the containment vessels. Like, this got nothing to do with Fukushima, what we're looking at. But that's the idea, is to manipulate you. Look at that smile, man. That would frighten his grandmother. Ensuring safety at all times. Got your paper suits on? Check. Let's roll. Like, these can't protect you at a nuclear meltdown site. They're standing on steel sheets. They got these, like, 16 feet by 30-foot steel sheets that gets welded off-site and brought in and laid down in patterns for them to walk on, because originally they sent in the bulldozers, and the bulldozers like bulldoze in the fuel pellets and that right away. It was these remote control bulldozers is the official story. Tepco is still in the process of trying to understand. Well, Tepco is not a decommissioning authority. You're supposed to spell Tepco in capital letters because it's an acronym. Tokyo Electric Power Company Organization, right? And Tepco shouldn't be in charge. Why would you put Tepco in charge? Which, by the way, was nationalized right away because they went bankrupt, which means the government runs the show. How to remove the molten fuel. These are disgusting maggots. Did I mention that tonight? So you're not going to remove no molten fuel from reactor 4, for instance. The fuel is at the top of the building with the reactor core and the 2 fuel pools. There is no top to the buildings. And I disrespect them for pretending that it is. Like, the real thing is, how do we remove Tepco? And they're claiming 58 microsieverts an hour. 58 microsieverts an hour. 58. There's 1,000 of them for a millisievert, for goodness sakes. There's 1,000 millisieverts for a sievert. So, like, to suggest that there's only 58 millisieverts at a nuclear meltdown site. Yeah, and by the way, you wouldn't measure it. Typically, you would have 2 measurements there. The millisieverts, which is about 750 atoms each, the microsieverts. And these are physical atoms that you can breathe in and get in your hair and your clothing and everything else. Very dangerous stuff. And just one of them is enough to cause an autoimmune trigger that will compromise your life in the near future. You should be measuring in becquerels, atomic decays. So this is all hyperbole. This is not actual. Like, if they send this into the reactor, that dies like every other robot they've ever sent in there. Except it dies quicker because it's so stupid and tiny. And like when you look at the reactor, people like me and you, we don't have any illusions, right? But their job is to convince those who don't know any better. Their job is to convince people who don't know what the reactors look like. You got to get rid of nuclear. Nuclear is going to get rid of you. You might as well get rid of them. Because they are getting rid of you. Japanese nuclear power plant operator, Tokyo Electric Power Company, wrapped up testing on Tuesday of the first drones deployed at the non-existent Fukushima Daiichi plant in this decades-long decommissioning. Why is a corporation with no decommissioning background decommissioning the biggest nuclear meltdown site in history? Everybody should be like hanging their head in absolute humiliation that these people exist. A snake-shaped robot that's a couple of feet long at best, as stupid as you can possibly imagine. 13 years later, and 4 are set to be dispatched in February to survey the damage at the Reactor 1. Now, Reactor 1 liquefied. Let me see if I can find some stuff for you. First off, Reactor 1 detonated, for goodness sakes. And you can call in at 709-589-4406. Listen, this is an industry whose time have come and gone. And they need to be given the bum's rush on the way out the door. All of them should be in jail for life at Tepco. There's nobody at Tepco that should be allowed to ever be on our planet free again. Not one. These are the worst of humanity. All nuclear scientists, too. Knew these reactors melted down and all of them remained silent. Right. We should bring back public burning at the stakes. These people should be literally burnt at the stakes after they're convicted. It's the moral and ethical thing to do. And give them adrenaline so they don't die too fucking quick. Because that's what you're doing. That's what they're doing to every species on the planet. They're burning them to death with radiation. Like, the story is so horrific. It's unbelievable. Like, the whole story. It's very complicated to try to tell it in 2 hours because you can't, right? There's so many facets to it. Oh yeah, get back on track there. You're looking for Reactor 1. Okay, we're there, I think. Wait, George, we are there. Look at that. All right, here we go. So Reactor 1 is where they're going to send in the drones. This is Reactor 1 detonating, for goodness sakes. That's the fuel pool and the reactor core that was running at the time going, bye-bye, everybody. And the whole world just sits there in silence and lets them destroy everybody and everything's future. We've been hot on their trail now for 13 years. Potential catastrophe from Reactor 2, making Tokyo area uninhabitable if Reactor 2 goes, which is right alongside of. So if Reactor 2 goes, you have to evacuate Tokyo. But Reactor 3 and 4 went and no one even mentioned it. After 13 years, almost 13 years after its core melted down and the fuel pools detonated, the hydrogen in one of the worst nuclear disasters in history, how many times do we hear that exact narrative, exactly narrative? Every journalist on the planet somehow magically knows to write that very exact narrative. And everyone that ever did should spend at least 30 years in jail. Almost 13 years after court, it's called social engineering. It's totally unacceptable. You're destroying everything and everybody's future for a fucking paycheck. The hydrogen blast wasn't a hydrogen blast. I guess it's a blast, I suppose. These were detonations. I just buzzed past a perfect picture. Let me show you reactor 3 detonation. That's reactor 3. It's not a hydrogen, that's a nuclear detonation. And you know, they used to use uranium, and they still do, I'm sorry, in fracking, where they'll put, say if you put down a pound of explosives, then you're going to use probably 8 grams of uranium to make it even unbelievably powerful. And you do that because the drilling tubes are so small that you can't pack all the explosives they need down there, right? So they lace it with actual uranium, not yellow cake, but uranium's gone through a chain reaction. The industry is completely, there's no accountability at any given time, so now they're so evil. They think it's totally normal. Although robots have surveyed the submerged interior of Unit 1 reactor core's containment, like there's zero containment at Reactor 1. So we got to bring back burning at the stakes, burning these disgusting parasites at the stakes. That's the only thing we can do with them as an incentive not to be evil. There really isn't another option. Hang on, now let's go look at some number 1. Let me dig up the files. You're getting it now, you bastards. Here we go. Number 1 melted down in 50 minutes. We're almost there, and just get a couple more of these. Here we go. We got it. We got it now, baby. Reactor 1 melted down in 50 minutes. There was no melted pile of fuel in 3.5 hours. It was all gone in lickety split. It burnt at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. I showed you the detonation a few minutes ago, right? Of number 1. It's not a meltdown. That's a detonation. Here, let me show you another picture. It's impossible to bulk of the melted fuel is in Unit 1 containment, indicating an explosive event. Let me see. Yeah, that looks like an explosive event to me, Dana. They're lucky I cannot healthy enough to fucking fly down there and punch them in the face. I wouldn't hesitate, eh? You're from Tokyo? Come here, I want you. Boom. Slurp. Chris Harris, a nuclear engineer, proved that the fuel fragments were sneezed at a number 1 Fukushima reactor into the torus. No, it was sneezed out into the biosphere everywhere. Off the chart, 225 sieverts per hour at reactor number 1. Well, that's what those particular Geiger counters maxed out at, was 225 sieverts. Japanese leader on 311. Most don't know, but reactor 1 melted down in 5 hours. We almost lost 1/3 of the nation due to Fukushima. Like what? Like, so they're suggesting reactor 1 had melted down, he would have lost 1/3 of the nation, right? I don't know why they should be allowed to live on our planet. I can't comprehend why these fucking scumbags should be allowed to live on our planet. I can't, for the life of me, come up with a sensible reason why they should be allowed to breathe the same fucking air as me and you. Reactor 3 and Reactor 4, like, they don't even exist. But the media's like, well, if number 1 had gone, we would have evacuated Tokyo. Yeah, but Reactor 3 was a mixed plutonium mixed oxide fuel reactor. I mean, both of these stumps should have been razed to the ground. They only left them there to frig you over. Up to 1 million sieverts. Well, let me see. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. 1 million sieverts is a lethal dose from how far away? How many football fields away? It's an instant lethal dose. These kinds of numbers. Too hot to attempt to measure other areas. Too hot. This is not hot. This is the homeless. Tell the homeless to go over there and they drop dead. Tell another homeless to go over here, they drop dead. It's not hot. It's lethal. U.S. media is fucking media. Only mention reports about melt through at reactor number 1 and not at number 2 in reactor 3. Reactor 4 melted down too, you piece of shit. Disgusting piece of shit. And this is allegedly where they're mixing the water for the tritium, right? The tritium fable. Does that look like there's fucking tritium to anybody? Let me get off this story because I'm starting to get a little cranky. Just a little tiny fucking bit. Once I get cranky, there's no way back until the show is over, unfortunately. Once I fucking go down that road, it's a disaster. I'm already on the road, so I got nothing to lose by keeping going. UK nuclear plant hit by new multi-year delays. This story blows my mind. It could cost up to $35 billion. I'm sorry. 35 billion euros. The latest overrun, the endless overrun, the Hinkley Point C, is a blow to the UK energy plans. Like, they're using every precious metal that's on the friggin' planet. It's the biggest construction site in human history. And they're calling it resource-free. What is it? They use the words carbon-free? Like, just to produce all of this stuff is the most resource carbon-intensive event in human history. The amount of cement they're using, you can build a sidewalk all the way to Rome from United Kingdom. Every piece of metal is inspected 3 times. And the success of Hinkley Point is expected to provide power for 5 million homes. 5 million homes. Wrap your mind around that statement. And then the minute that you take the fuel out of the containment, put it in the fuel pool, it poisons all 5 million people. 5 million homes. And it gives them Alzheimer's and dementia and autism and diabetes and Down syndrome. All of these, and these Hinkley Point and Sizewell and every other nuclear power plant worldwide is surrounded by farms, as far as you can see. How come? Because the fuel pools are still splitting atoms, and they will be for another million years plus. Because when you talk about we don't know what to do with the nuclear waste, they forget to mention that the waste is splitting atoms. Those atoms are the same atoms that would power 1 million homes. How many atoms do you got to split to boil water for 5 million homes? Imagine what that's going to be like in the fuel pools, still splitting atoms into all those farms and into your air and into your environment and into your atmosphere all day, every day. And every 18 months, they're going to put more fuel in the pool, and that's going to be split in atoms. And every decade, it's a sickening amount hemorrhaging from these places every second. The world is making a fatal mistake by not going after their throats. Britain's flagship, despicable, stupid Hinkley Point C nuclear plant has been delayed until 2029 at the earliest. It could end up costing up to $35 billion, or twice the initial budget. And the endless blow. Britain's flagship Hinkley Point. No, it's actually to 2031. At the earliest at 2029. Like, you're talking so far down the road. There's zero possibility this is not going to almost double again. It's zero possibility. That's what we've been covering for years and friggin' years. And EDF is the last people you want building a reactor for you, but they're about it, right? Britain can't build their own reactors. Which has also experienced long delays in recent parallel projects in Finland and France, China. that uses the same idiot reactor technology that has never been proven. Said the project could slip until 2021, 31, 32, 33. I'm going to say 2037. But then they're going to have all kinds of problems. They're going to have to take it offline like they do with every other reactor for 4 or 5 years. And then every 4 or 5 years after that, they'll have to do major upgrades. There won't be many people around to complain, I suppose. Blaming the complexity of installing electromechanical systems. And it's like a million pieces of equipment there. No, nothing could possibly go wrong. An intricate piping at Hinkley, the design for which is only recently finalized. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. Experienced workers left the industry after a lull in projects following Fukushima accident. Labor shortages were one of the issues at Hinkley. We have found civil construction slower than we hoped and faced inflation, labor, material shortages, because they'll only use the best, the very, very, very best. And everything that goes on that site has to be triple inspected by professionals that don't know each other. And they all have to have a consensus that material is okay for the site. It has to be the best of the best forging, the best of the best wiring, the best of the best cement, the best of the best everything, every facet. Because that's the easiest way to steal money, see? Under EDF's latest scenario, one of the 2 planned reactors in Somerset could be ready in 2029. Like, let's not play this game where it could be ready. A 2-year delay compared with the company's previous estimate of 2027, and in adverse conditions could drag until 2031. What do you mean adverse conditions? It's always adverse conditions with this lot. And it didn't give an estimate for the second reactor. Surprise, surprise, surprise! The bill, meanwhile, will reach $31 billion to $35 billion in 2015 prices, depending on when the plant is completed. The upper limit is equivalent to $46 billion in today's prices. That compares to an initial budget of $18 billion, and it was supposed to be finished next year. Zero hope of that. Like the one in Finland took over 14, almost 15 years. They fired it up and had to shut it down again right away. Another couple of $1 billion. We'll get it. Don't worry. Just keep throwing the money at us. We'll figure it out. $46 billion. Which is, in 2015 prices in Canadians, $96 billion. The twin reactor scam in Somerset is the first in a new generation of nuclear power stations intended to provide baseload electricity, which of course geothermal can do better, as the UK becomes more dependent on intermittent renewable energy from the wind and sun. Intermittent. It's only intermittent because, and every time you hear that word, these people should have half their teeth pulled out. It's because they won't acknowledge the storage solutions, and there's around 20 storage solutions that actually exist for renewables. Like, I'm really sick of these people. Progress has been sluggish. Progress. Like, they got, 9,000 employees working there? 9,000. 9,000. And they can't get the job done. They got a million excuses. And every one of them is they need another $1 billion or two. The former chief has boasted of EDF, boasted in 2007 that by 2017 people would be able to cook their Christmas turkeys using electricity from Hinkley. By 2017. Not like 2037 maybe. Why would you do that to yourselves when you have so many other solutions available? Why would you go down this stupid road with a disease factory? These are disease factories. Why do they hate you so much? And I'm like, the only reason they're doing this is because they hate your guts. The EDF finance chief resigned in 2016 over the decision to press on with the project, saying it would put France's financial future in jeopardy. And so their EDF was nationalized, right? It ended up being nationalized by the French state last year because of the huge losses it suffered from 30 reactors breaking down in France. When you're getting reactors built by a country that has 30 broken reactors, you're mental in the head. You've lost the plot. EDF and the French government are seeking ways for Britain also to fund the higher construction costs. Britain won't fund their own reactors. The UK has said it has no intention of funding it. Its own power supply. You got any idea how dysfunctional that actually is, that statement actually is? Fukushima then and now. People like this should be in jail for the rest of their life. Holding up a Geiger counter where they claim there's 33 microsieverts right alongside of Medusa, Reactor 3. The revelation that Japan has started to release So August the 24th, 2023, the piece of shit Japs claimed that nothing got out of these buildings in 13 years. Nothing got out, Dana. Nothing. Dana's lying to you. Don't believe Dana. Dana's a scammer. These buildings are not destroyed. Blurp, blurp, blurp. The whole world is in a fucking sleepy state. Can't understand, can't comprehend the danger they're in. Refuses to acknowledge that they have to be in charge themselves, right? Should nuclear scientists work at Fukushima nuclear meltdowns instead of the homeless? Now, the idea of the poll is because nuclear scientists have never worked there. Can you show me a video where nuclear scientists are at Fukushima? Working away. Well, you can't, right? It's only the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language. In March of 2011, a nuclear facility was severely damaged. Severely damaged, really. By a massive earthquake and a huge tsunami and a tidal wave so colossal in strength it breached the sea defenses and flooded the plant's reactor buildings. It ripped out 1,200 miles of the coastline, up to 10 kilometers inland, out to sea, and created a pile of debris that was equal to the size of Texas. Caused a power cut that allowed fuel rods to overheat. Partially. And a partial meltdown. Partial meltdowns. Right, so anybody writes stuff like this is actually a definition of evil to suggest they're partial meltdowns. See, meltdowns are not something light to be taken lightly. Let me try to articulate it, because if I don't, I'll get upset. And nobody wants to hear me yelling and cursing. A few of you probably, but the majority probably don't want to hear me yelling. I don't want it myself. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm pretty sure the majority of you don't want to hear me yelling and cursing. And here's something articulate. Okay. A magic potion. Am I supposed to pull out of my butt this time? I wonder. Oh, I know just what to do. Oh, there we go. I want you to think about, because Chernobyl is like a snowflake compared to Fukushima. It's like a paper towel. Chernobyl is brutal. I mean, Chernobyl is freaking brutal. But I put this folder together because I want you to think about the different ways that the academic community has spent money studying it. And by doing that, this is only a fraction. Like, I got a folder there with 1,800 studies of Chernobyl, and they studied every facet of everything on the bloody planet, basically. And so when you read through it, you start to realize there's some, like, why are they studying all of this stuff for if it's like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine? Evaluation of cesium activities in plant drugs, because your plants that you're using for pharmaceutical drugs are sucking up radioactive fallout. And so they're no longer pharmaceutical, now they're deadly drugs. The Wall Street Journal official sharply raised radiation levels for residents to get iodate pills after the meltdown, 75 times higher than the disgusting parasitic UN's World Health Organization recommended for children. So why would you raise the limit that's been established 75 times higher before you gave them pills, like to protect the thyroid, that don't actually protect the thyroid? Transferred Chernobyl-derived cesiums, iodines, from flowers to honey and pollen. And guess where that, so the bumblebees are disappearing because of perpetual radioactive fallout. Is one of the biggest threats to bumblebees. Analysts of radio contamination data collected in Italy following Chernobyl. In the disposition vegetation of cow milk. Agricultural countermeasures taken in Chernobyl region. You can't, like what they're talking about is putting potassium in the farmer's field and telling the farmers that plants can't suck up radiation, so it's okay now to harvest it and sell it. This is strictly voodoo talking. Like, the academics that are doing this, and you got their names there, there's no reason that they shouldn't be arrested. There's no reason that a jury wouldn't convict them. Chernobyl fallout in BC seaweed, Canada. The variability of Chernobyl cesium retention in water columns of lakes in the English Lake District, they're talking about in the United Kingdom, 2 years and 4 years after disposition. What was really interesting about Chernobyl was they closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, and United Kingdom, right? Because of radioactive fallout from Chernobyl 3,000 kilometers away. And if you look at a map, it had to go through all kinds of countries to get to United Kingdom, right? And so what it really means, though, is you were supposed to abandon Europe. Because the radiation doesn't seek out the farms. It contaminated everything symmetrically. And the farms themselves were so contaminated, it was illegal to harvest that stuff, right? Which meant all your fresh drinking water, all your communities, all your schools, all your hospitals, everything had so much radioactive fallout, it warranted abandoning permanently your country. Europe. They've done sex ratio studies on Europe because the whole country was polluted by radioactive fallout. And Chernobyl, it was brutal, but it's just a paper towel compared to Fukushima. Long-range transport of gases, iodine-131. It has a short half-life. So it got a short half-life and it has a long-range transport to southern Poland. Transport of iodine-131. And so they do all these studies in iodine-131 and 137. And you will find some studies on the real stuff, but not all of the real stuff. Like, you'll probably never find studies on curium isotopes, which is the biggest byproduct of radiated fuel rods. But what they do is they can do a mathematical equation and extrapolate the other isotopes, because they can find the 137, they can find the iodine-131. Transport of iodine-131 through the grass and cow milk pathways in northeastern U.S. dairy following Chernobyl. So they closed 9,400 farms, Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom, but that wasn't the end of it, which is, quite a ways into Europe. So it had to coat all of Europe just to get to the United Kingdom. There was lethal doses in the Alps, in French Alps, in the ice, many years later when the ice was melting. Aspects of environmental monitoring by the British nuclear fuel following the Chernobyl. British nuclear fuel? These are just degenerate criminals. So 239, 240, 238 plutonium, 90 strontium, 137 cesium. And why would you put in rubidium for it? It's not created by the reactors. It's like putting potassium in, and you'll see them do that many times, which is not created by reactors. Concentrations in the surface here in Austria due to dispersion. And so, like, I got folders of just abortions in all these countries we're talking about. I got folders of just abortions in these countries because of Chernobyl. Contamination of food in Czechoslovakia by cesium, which is a British terminology, radioisotopes from the Chernobyl accident. So there's a big, when you see cesium with an A, that means that study was heavily influenced by British. So contamination of food in Czechoslovakia, most likely the British were brought in to cover it up and quantify harvesting and feeding it to the population. And then a lot of these people that were involved in that cover-up would have bought huge amounts of shares in the pharmaceutical companies because they knew the diseases were going to manifest in those countries, right? Chernobyl followed in the Shakespeare Bay region. What's interesting to me about Shakespeare Bay was the U.S. military was using Shakespeare Bay for depleted uranium munitions exercises. So that's the last spot. I gotta spray down the jugular veins with some peroxide. Because when my throat gets a little bit sore, that's how I resolve it, is I spray my jugular veins with peroxide, and that floods my whole body with oxygen right away. And you never become immune to it because it's just oxygen, right? But if I wake up in the morning, got a scratchy throat, bang, 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 gone within 30 seconds. As soon as I finish, you can feel like you're breathing deep, clean air again. Pregnancy outcome in Sweden, and I'm doing the same thing with chlorine dioxide, by the way. Not for the same purpose, though, but I'm doing the same kind of scenario. Because it goes right into the bloodstream right away. It's really good. Both of these are really good for killing viruses and pathogens and germs and stuff like that. Pregnancy outcome in Sweden after Chernobyl accident. You'll never have the flu again if you do that. If you get it, every time that you're feeling the flu, just spray it down, your jugular veins. Pregnancy outcome in Sweden after Chernobyl. Contamination in Austria soil with cesium. It can't be just contaminated with cesium. And so every time you see a study like that, and the majority of the studies will only acknowledge cesium, I just nothing but contempt for these people. Cesium again, which is a British influence whenever you see it, and perch in the Swedish lakes. So they got their hands in the cover-up worldwide, don't they? Transport of cesium, 241 americium, which decays to 241 plutonium. Plutonium isotopes also in the Baltic Sea in a Kurvinagon, I can't even pronounce it, lagoon. Chernobyl fallout in Finland, hot areas. Fukushima, Chernobyl. So, like, if Chernobyl can do all this damage, imagine what Fukushima got done. Because Chernobyl is literally nothing compared to Fukushima. But Chernobyl was brutal. It's brutal what it done. But it's nothing, and I mean nothing, compared to a single reactor from Fukushima, let alone 4 of them. Hot areas, not hot spots, but hot areas. Long-term variation, 1986, 1998. Post-Chernobyl strontium, cesium, plutoniums. Concentrations in the air, dispositions to the ground, resuspension factors, resuspension rates in southern Germany. So every time you have a forest fire, you're liberating decades of sequestered isotopes back into the environment. You want to tape up your windows. You want to tape up your doors. You want to turn off your air conditionings and put blankets over to stop the ingression of smoke from forest fires from coming into your home. Like, it's a deadly threat because it sequesters in your muscles, your organs, and your bones, and it destroys your health from the inside out. Thyroid radiation doses in Britain arising from Chernobyl 3,000 kilometers away. So why are they doing all these different studies? Because this is just a fraction of the studies they're going to do. In fact, the most studies they're doing is Down syndrome and autism right away, because they know that's going to show up in newborn babies right away. Iodine-131 and other radionuclides environmental samples collected from Ibaraki, Japan after Chernobyl. Thyroid radiation doses in Britain arising from Chernobyl, which means you're producing massive radioactive hormones. Dry and wet disposition of Chernobyl aerosols in southern Finland. Transfers radiocesium via reindeer meat to man. They still can't sell the reindeers in Latvia, which they've been doing for 1,000 years. Is now destroyed because of a nuclear accident 1,000 miles away. Effects of countermeasures. There is no countermeasures. And the people that advocate there's a countermeasure should be probably scalped. Uptake of radionuclides by plants after the Chernobyl accident. I just despise. These are murderers. These are scumbags. These are degenerates that advocate stuff like that. And I'm particularly vexed with the ones who talk about putting potassium in the farmer's field and that somehow makes the food healthy. These people should have their tongues stapled to the back of their throat. Uptake of radionuclides by plants after the Chernobyl accident. Uptake of radionuclides, well, that's what plants do. They suck up that radiation. It acts like macronutrients, right? So because they're so tiny, but they're so powerful. Changes in thyroid cancer increase in Scotland post Chernobyl. I'll be blaming that on wind scale, not by no means would I be blaming that on Chernobyl. I'd be blaming it 100%, 1,000,000% on the wind scale that they covered up that nuclear meltdown at Sellafield, right? Radiocesium aquatic invertebrates, Norway, 1986 to 1989 after Chernobyl fallout. Ionizing radiation, human gender proportions at birth. A concise review of the literature, complementary analysis of the historical and recent data. Propagation of Chernobyl 131 impulse through the air, grass, animal milk pathways northwestern Greece. So you can see how this contaminates all these different countries. They're very, very far away. They're not spending all of this money on these studies because it's benign and innocuous and harmless. Sexual dysfunction in Chernobyl patients. Radioactivity in breast milk after Chernobyl. And all of these studies on humans, you have to apply that to all the species. The species are way more susceptible, way more vulnerable than the human is. And the human is extremely vulnerable. Transports of radioactive isotopes from the ear to the cow's milk produced in northwestern Italian farms following Chernobyl. Disposition of Chernobyl followed northeast Italy. Determination of 137 cesium in the water systems of the pre-alpine lakes, which is France, right? Analysis of the radioactivity levels in soil and crops from Campanian region, southern Italy. This is incredible studies. I'm not going to get through them all because we've got more news to cover, but anthropogenic, which is man-made, cesiums, an atmospheric air, well, there is no natural cesium-137. It's always anthropogenic, man-made. An atmospheric aerosols in Breslavia and around the nuclear power plants in Slovakia. A comparison and model and measure Chernobyl cesium-90 or strontium-90 distribution in the Black Sea. Thyroid cancers, young people from northern England's evidence of a sustained excess in females in Crumbia. Crumbia is like Sellafield. It's right alongside of a weapons production, fuel production site, where they reclaim plutonium from mixed oxide and create mixed oxide fuel to produce weapons-grade plutonium, high-assay plutonium. You know, there's studies in Colombia of child clusters of leukemia, and academics actually produced studies saying it was caused by the common cold. That the leukemia's clusters in children was caused by the common flu. So they wouldn't have to pay out to the victims what they caused. Can you imagine these academics? Could be your friends, your families, your neighbors. I hate their guts. I hate everything about them. These are fucking cowards. Transfer radionuclide dose assessment to ants and ants hills in Swedish forest ecosystem. Ants, well, if it's going to transfer ants and ants hills, it's going to transfer the beetles and the flies and the species that eat them and blah, blah, blah. It can't just be one species. Why are you studying all of this? Because it matters. Because it's a fucking real problem. And by the way, I apologize. I don't even realize I'm swearing tonight. That happened to me last night too. Very unusual for me. Studies of iodine CCMs in milk, meat, and vegetables in northeast Scotland following Chernobyl. So they had an accident themselves and they're trying to blame it on Chernobyl, see? That's my take on these. And the United Kingdom nuclear industry, the most worthless humans you'll ever come across. They really are. The most worthless people imaginable. Calculation of individual effective dose equivalent in Italy following Chernobyl. Scale to access nuclear incidences need revisions. Agricultural countermeasures taken in Chernobyl. There is no countermeasure. What he was doing was alleging putting potassium in the farmer's field, and that convinced the farmer that it was safe now to poison everybody. Because the farmer doesn't understand the difference. The most worthless humans imaginable is a nuclear academic. Influence of soil acidification in southern Norway and the cesium exposures to moose. Like, it's hard to appreciate it. One of these nights, one of these days, I'm going to start a show, and we're going to go right through 1,800 academic studies just on Chernobyl that I don't even know if I showed it to you yet. And each one of them is going to be on a different facet of the ecosystem. And it'll blow your mind. It'll just blow your mind of how methodical they have looked at. It'll blow your mind. Because it gets into everything. There's nothing escapes it. And we got the studies to prove it. And what you're seeing tonight is quantifying those assertions just on their own. But to see the 1,800 studies, I actually if you go over to my website, thenuclearproctologist.org, and you go to the news site, the news section, I got all of those studies we're talking about. I already posted up there for you. Post them up, I think, in 2023 or something, 2022. But if you scan down through my news section, you'll find those studies, and they're going to look like this. And what I used to do with them was when I'm working sometimes, I'll have them on the big screen TV, and they'll be just automatically playing, right? Like photos. And it's mind blowing because you'll sit there and you're trying to relax for a minute and you're looking at the TV screen, and it's like looking at a horror movie in real life. It's like there's no Hollywood movie compares with it. No, actually, every once in a while. Not that often, though, but every 8, 9, 10, 11 months or something, I get into one of those. I start doing shows where I just don't give a fuck anymore, and I just say whatever's on my mind. And I think it's about blowing off steam for me, right? Where I got the stress of doing this every day and reading it, and I can't possibly articulate it every night, but the stress of it catches up to me, and if I don't get it off my soul, it'll eat the fucking daylights out of me, right? So every once in a while, I find myself where I'll sit there and I'll just slam the fuck out of these degenerate pieces of shit. And if they were sat in front of me, that's exactly what I'll be saying to them. Like, there's never going to be a nice word between me and a nuclear academic. Let's put it that way. There'll never be a cordial conversation. because I hate their guts. The amount of contempt I have for them is hard to comprehend. It's because, like, I read so much of this stuff that I hate their guts. I really do, right? I hate their guts. Like, if I was the president of a country, I'd have them all hung. Radiocesium content of meat in Italy after Chernobyl and changes during the cooking process. This is another bunch of academics who are trying to convince people that by cooking a radioactive food, you can, and we've seen Japan do the same fucking thing, claiming that you can cook the food and that will get rid of the radiation. And we got to go back to the old days, 20, 30 years ago, when these people, when we seen them, we punch them right in the fucking mouth the minute you seen them. Transfer of cesium and tea and other foods demand after Chernobyl accident in Turkey. So they're saying Turkey, the radiation transferred to tea and other foods, you know, like everything you eat. There's no reason not to hate their fucking guts. Silver, radioactive silver and fungi in central Italy after Chernobyl. Like, why are you doing all these studies? Why are you looking for it? Because you know it's going to be there, right? Transfer of Chernobyl fallout cesium. I've never heard of cesium. I hate somebody in the United Kingdom just a little bit more. Isotopes in the cow food chain. Radionuclides from Fukushima accident in the air over Lithuania. Measurements and modeling approaches. Managing a radioactive fallout, the Swedish experience. Like, Sweden closed their freshwater fishery for 30 years after Chernobyl. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. Because what it means is the water wasn't safe to drink in Sweden for 30 years. You're supposed to abandon Sweden. All of these countries, these studies that they're trying to say, you know, oh, it's not so bad. But when you put them all together, you're supposed to abandon every one of these countries. Italy, Sweden, Czechoslovakia, Lithuania, United Kingdom. You should have abandoned every one of them countries. France, Italy, Finland, Turkey, all of them. You should have been evacuated and never go back. That's what these studies actually mean. Indoor surface accumulation radionuclides particles after Chernobyl fallout. The transfer of plutonium 239, 240 to cow milk. That's 239 is, you do not want that in your body. You are going to get sick at some point and it's going to destroy your life. Colored rain dust from the Sahara Desert is still radioactive. And where does the Sahara Desert end up blowing to? It blows to France, right? And who made Sahara Desert radioactive? Oh, that's right, France. What France done to the French Polynesians, it was just one of the many that they fucked over. What they done to the French Polynesians was equal to a Nagasaki bomb going off every week for 12 years. Every week for 12 years. And they still deny them today that they were poisoned. And so how many administrations is that, I wonder? 10, 12, 14 administrations have refused to acknowledge they poisoned the French Polynesians. Right? And so when you look at the cycle of evil, every administration, which lasts, 4 or 5 years, each administration has to cover up that crime, has to participate in a crime. And then they go home and tell their loved ones and their families that they're good people, right? And they look at each other in the mirror and they say, well, I'm actually a good person. Yeah, I fucked over all the women and children and everybody else in the French Polynesian, but I'm a good person. You're not a good person, you piece of shit. You're a parasite. Radiocesium on urban surfaces in West Colombia 5 months after Chernobyl. First off, there wasn't a single surface, urban surface or not, in West Colombia pre-Chernobyl that wasn't fucking hideously contaminated from Sellafield, previously known as NuScale. And the reason they changed the name from NuScale to Sellafield was to hide the crimes that they committed. They went to the theaters when NuScale melted down, and kidnapped the people from the back rows of the theaters. The police went there in buses and kidnapped the people in the back row. Because back in those days, in 1959, the poor people would sit in the back rows, right? Because back then the TVs were only little tiny boxes, right? And so a theater was a big friggin' deal. So all the wealthy people sat up front, but the very impoverished people sat in the very back. So they kidnapped them, brought them to NuScale, it was melting down, and gave them long rods, and told them to push the fuel rods out of the reactors. They didn't get the military. They didn't go to the universities and get the nuclear academics, nuclear scientists. They didn't go to the nuclear corporations and get them to come do it. They went to the fucking theater and got the most vulnerable people of society at gunpoint. And then they hid it from the population that it was melting down. Why is the world tolerating these fucking disgusting parasites? Why do you tolerate this? I don't fucking tolerate it. These are scumbags. Effects of low-level radioactive soil contamination, sterilization, degradation, a radio-labeled wheat straw, which is used for cow food and that, right? Feed. Effects of low-level radioactive soil contamination, sterilization. A 10-year survey of radio contamination of the edible Balkan mushrooms, cesium-137. Again, every time you hear cesium-137, you got to replace it with plutonium and americium, neptunium and uranium and strontium and curium isotopes. And excess doses to the population. So all of these people makes their fortunes by fucking stabbing everybody in the population in the face and in the back all day long. Dispersions of Fukushima radionuclides in the global atmospheres and the oceans. Concentrations of iodine-131 in the urine of Japanese adults and children following Chernobyl. So it went everywhere. It covered and contaminated everything. And this was just like a sneeze compared to Fukushima. Measuring the radiation exposure of Norwegian reindeer under field conditions. Look at all the people in that study. Vertical distribution inventories of cesium in the Syrian soils of the eastern Mediterranean regions. Radioactivity in breast milk and placenta after Chernobyl. Hot particles in Chernobyl fallout to Finland. Hot particles in Finland. A single hot particle, man, will destroy your health in increments over a decade or so. Fukushima radiation release is no threat to the health. Just a single name on that study. And so people like that should be dealt with. And anything from New Scientists, these are degenerates. I got a whole folder on New Scientists. They're the most revolting parasites you can imagine. They fucking hate your guts. They're disgusting parasites. The role of rivers in Chernobyl radiocesium delivery, distribution, accumulation in the coastal sediments of the northern Adriatic Sea. Assessments of radiation doses in the Republic of Croatia after Chernobyl reactor accident. Study on plutonium isotopes determinations in the soil from the region of Poland. Activities of cesium in game and mushrooms in Poland. Factors contributing to radiocesium variability in upland sheep flocks in West Columbia, United Kingdom. Effects of radioactive pollution and dynamite of infectious diseases in wildlife. Particle mixing process of Chernobyl fallout in deep Norwegian sea sediments. Evidence for seasonal changes. Lesions in children born on the year of the catastrophe in Chernobyl. Chernobyl health effects, radiation or stress. And people who write studies like that, these are the worst humans can find. 137 cesium in freshwater fish in Finland since 1986. That's 2006. A statistical analyst with multivariate linear regression models. I mean, they banned freshwater fishing in Sweden for 30 fucking years. Nothing else needs to be said about it. Neuroinflammatory responses in rats chronically exposed to 137 cesium. Neural inflammatory response in rats that are chronically exposed to gamma. 137 cesium contamination in tea and yerba mate in South America. Urinary bladder carcinogens in humans after Chernobyl accident in Ukraine. Cancer in Sweden derived from fallout after the Chernobyl. And Chernobyl is just literally a paper towel compared to Fukushima. And Chernobyl was brutal, as you can see. Plutonium, other alpha emitters in mushrooms from Poland, Spain, and Ukraine. The transfer of cesium-137 strontium-90 from soil to food crops from the Chernobyl. Mental disturbances in persons exposed to radiation after Chernobyl. Well, there's autism, Down syndrome, there's schizophrenia, there's Alzheimer's and dementia. Effectiveness of countermeasures applied in Belarus to produce milk and meat with acceptable levels of radiocesium after Chernobyl. Acceptable levels of there is no acceptable levels. Your body attacks every single atom with the same vigor for the rest of your life. It relentlessly. So if you got an isotope in your body, first off, it's pulsing energy like an explosion in every direction, almost at the speed of light, and that's wrecking just, I don't know how many, but it's an absurd amount of cells and DNA and chromosomes every second. So first off, your body tries to repair every one of them every second, and so it keeps flooding the area because it's pulsing every second, right? And it can't repair everything. So for the rest of your life, you're gonna hammer that thing with white blood cells. And so every single white blood cell has to displace a red blood cell. And so that's incredible cause and effect. But it's not only that, your body also has to attack the source, which is the atom, the isotope. So it'll attack that also every second with white blood cells and try to build a sarcophagus around it that you call a tumor. And that could take 10, 20, 30, 40 years. But eventually that's what's going to happen. And then it'll get diagnosed. Bladder lesions induced by persistent long-term low-dose ionizing radiation in humans. Pediatric thyroid cancers in children exposed to fallout. Well, see, the children's, they're developing, right? And so when the thyroid is saturated with anthropogenic man-made isotopes, then you're producing an awful amount of radioactive hormones, which, by the way, are stored a lot of the times in your pituitary glands also, which is in your brain. Now, when you flip that and you say, well, that's what's happening to the insects and the birds and all the other little species in your forest, besides the full-body X-rays from the gammas, the alphas, the neutrons, and betas, right? Because they're all pulsing, and that energy doesn't mix with each other. So they're gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas. They pulse energy. And they're almost at the speed of light. So when they hit each other, they're almost at the speed of light. They can't mix. And so they change direction. And that effect is known as an X-ray. And so in the forest, all the little species were getting full-body X-rays after Fukushima in particular. And we sterilized the forest to the point where we sterilized the bacteria and the fungus. So the forest isn't breaking down. The foliage, the litter isn't breaking down in your forest. And, and because you killed off the bacteria and the fungus, which is what we really seen heavily after Chernobyl, by the way. And so after a number of years, the forest doesn't suck up water anymore because you don't have the ecosystem anymore. You kill the bacteria and the fungus, which supported the ecosystem, which would break down the foliage and the litter, right? So that stuff doesn't break down. So now when you get lightning strikes, you have these big wafers floating up. And they travel long distances and start other forest fires. Because normally they would break down and they wouldn't be flammable, right? But not only that, you're having flash floods because your forest doesn't soak up water. The water just runs through the forest instead of soaking up because it doesn't have that ecosystem anymore. Female reproduction's area radiation influence after an accident at Chernobyl. Female reproduction areas. And so everything you see for a human, you have to multiply by all the species. Weathering of radiocesium contamination in urban streets, walls, and roofs. Weathering, Well, it's like you can't weather it; it has to go somewhere. So if it's displaced, if the radioactive fallout is displaced, it has to gather up somewhere. So if you check under like your rain drains, where like your drainage system coming off your roofs will come down a pipe, that's where you should put your Geiger counter in a plastic bag close to those areas, and you'll see the numbers going mad because it gathers up, right? Cesium ion exchange absorptions on urban building materials, a post-Chernobyl study. Reduction of external dose in a wet contaminated housing area in Russia. Radioactive contamination of the aquatic ecosystem following Chernobyl. Modification of cholesterol metabolism in the liver and brains after chronic contamination with just cesium to gammas 137. Fit for purpose modeling of radiocesium soil to plant transfer nuclear emergencies. Nuclear power after Chernobyl, 11th annual symposium of the Ukrainian Institute, 1986. The conditions of vegetative nervous systems Belarus children after Chernobyl. Discharge of cesium and strontium by the Finnish rivers to the Baltic Sea for a decade after Chernobyl. The effects of the accident at Chernobyl Atomic Energy Plant on the outcome of pregnancy. I have a whole folder on just pregnancies, massive abortions in country after country after country because of Chernobyl. Soil and plant-based countermeasures to reduce the cesium. See, there is no countermeasures for the reduced strontium and cesium uptake in the natural meadows. And the people that wrote that study should be arrested. It's complete disinformation to suggest that you can put countermeasures in your ecosystem to stop plants from uptaking radiation. And to suggest that it's only cesium and it's only strontium, I hate their guts. I hate their guts and everything. I despise every one of these people with unbelievable contempt. Radiocesium levels in human muscle samples in Greece 1 year after Chernobyl. Self-help countermeasure strategies for populations living within contaminated areas. Populations in contaminated areas. Self-help countermeasures. And some of these, like for Fukushima, rather than move the people out of the nuclear wasteland, they were suggesting that they would sit on magazines to shield them from the gamma shines. So if you put a magazine where there's a lot of radiation, if you're living there, rather than sitting directly on a chair or something, consider bringing in fresh magazines and newspapers or cardboard, corrugated cardboard, and sitting on that to shield you from the radiation. So instead of saying, you should move out of there because there's so much radiation, they were telling people to fucking use magazines to shield themselves from the radiation. These people shouldn't be on the same planet with us. They shouldn't be allowed to live on our planet. Lifetime accumulation of cesium and potassium-40. So why would you put potassium-40 in a study about anthropogenic man-made radiation? Because it's a good way of confusing people. And I have a particular hatred for those people, by the way. Radioactivity impact of Fukushima nuclear accident on the atmosphere. On the atmosphere. The atmosphere. Input of anthropogenic radionuclides into the world ocean. To the entire planet's ocean. Radioactive contamination of the soils of Georgia. Evaluation of brain function disorders in Chernobyl. Radiocesium accumulation from Chernobyl and nestlings of two-pied flycatcher populations in central Norway. They bioaccumulated because they're eating all the insects, right? We rarely see insect-eating birds anymore. It's mostly seed eaters. 256 assessments of the influence of Chernobyl on birth defects and abortion rates in Austria. Thyroid cancers in Bulgarian children and adolescents 10 years later. A study of hot particles collected in Sweden 1 year after Chernobyl. Why are we doing all these studies for, folks? Why would you allow this on your planet? See? Can you see the ridiculous amount of ways this stuff fucks up your planet? This stuff never goes away on top of that. Because every time you heard the word cesium and iodine, you've got to replace it with plutonium with a 240,000 year lifespan. You got to replace it with curium. You got to replace it with uranium-235. You got to replace it with the actual real dangerous isotopes because they're not going to warn you about that. DNA damage repair in urinary bladder carcinogens introduced by chronic low-dose ionizing radiation after Chernobyl in Ukraine. Like, Ukraine is one of the biggest wheat producers on the planet. It feeds incredible amount of impoverished countries worldwide radioactive food. Ukraine is completely contaminated. It should have been abandoned immediately along with Belarus. DNA damage repair in urinary bladder. You can't repair it. Your body has no autoimmune trigger to defend against it, so you can't repair it. The intellectual, developmental, and behavioral disorders in children from Belarus exposed while in the belly after Chernobyl. Cesium accumulation by forest-derived products in the Grome region. Biomagnification. So when it gets up to bird, it's 10 million times what it was in zooplankton and phytoplankton. The 137 cesium accumulation by forest-derived products, which cover that one. Influence of agricultural countermeasures on the ratio of different chemical forms of radionuclides in soil and soil solutions. So, like, these kind of studies are meant to quantify farmers to continue to grow food in the nuclear wasteland, to trick them and manipulate them and deceive them, and then by proxy poison millions of people with that radioactive food. And the industry knew this right from the inception, what the outcome of this fucking idiot machine was. Potential for disease initiation by inhaled beta-emitting radionuclides particles. Uptake in the herbage in Crumbia, which is right alongside of Sellafield, which is a nuclear wasteland itself. And it's surrounded by farms on top of that. Trying to blame everything on Chernobyl. Radiation contamination after Chernobyl nuclear accident and the effects and doses received by the population of Croatia. By the population, 1999. Chronic dermatosis therapy, which is a skin disease, applied to patients affected by Chernobyl. Impact of chronic radioactive stress on immune physiological conditions of small mammals. Individual dose due to radioactivity's accidental release from fusion reactors. The fusion reactors release so much tritium, like just in the models and the studies, that they should never be allowed to exist. They're worse than the Canadian CANDU reactors. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. And the Canadian CANDU reactors, what they're releasing, and just tritium, not counting everything else, just tritium, is revolting. It's a genocide. And an omnicide. 5-year consequences internally deposited radiocesium due to Chernobyl accident to a Japanese group determined by whole body counting. The effects of radioactive iodine on the thyroids of newborn, teenagers, and adult rats. Cryogenic disorders and changes in the blood in children living in the areas polluted after Chernobyl. Congenital malformations, mental retardation, infertility, developmental delays. I thought we were just going to we can't get through it all, so let me do this. Let me just start flicking through this so that at least you can see it yourself later. Measurements of anthropogenic man-made fallout in belugas and caribou before and after Fukushima. What are you doing studies like that for? Like, I can't go through all of these studies. We don't have enough time. Cancer thyroids in Latvia after Chernobyl. Exposure of man from radioactivity in the Baltic Seas. Strontium, cesium, plutonium, americium in alpine wetlands. Economic viabilities. Short rotation crops for energy production for the reuse of cesium. So, like, the fields that are too radioactive to consume the food, what these disgusting parasites decided to do was grow the food and burn it And so by proxy, then you liberate the radioactive isotopes back into the environment because you can't destroy it. Determination of curium isotopes. Look at this. 243, 244. And curium isotopes need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for the plutonium 239, for instance. And they're talking about the nuclear discharge fuel cycle. The La Hague in France and Sellafield accredited those reprocessing facilities accredited with polluting Europe and the Arctic. Yeah, the list goes on and on and on. Concentrations of soil in Hungary. We're almost through this section, I think. Nuclear safety after 3 Mile Island. The reason you have sirens around all your nuclear plants is because of 3 Mile Island. Right? They covered up what happened at 3 Mile Island, and there's a lot of transient people in that area. Impact of Chernobyl atomic station accident over the state of Cell. Laboratory experiments predict changes in the root uptakes after flooding events. Like, this attacks every facet of the ecosystem. Incidents of illegal abortions, congenital abnormalities, malformations in Hungary. External gamma dose rates delivered from the Chernobyl fallout in Belarus. Human bones obtained from routine joint replacement surgery as a tool for studies of plutonium, americium, and strontium body burden in general publics. Down syndrome in Scotland, 1978 to 1989. What they see is this massive discrepancy. Let me go back for one. Schizophrenia and left frontal temporal abnormalities in the aftermath of Chernobyl. Lack of radiation susceptibility among the residents of the high background radiation areas in Iran. Can we relax our so there's a place in Iran where they have a lot of natural emitters, right? And they try to claim that because there's not a high cancer rate there, but this stuff is the natural stuff, is not the anthropogenic man-made stuff. Therefore, we should drop any restrictions around nuclear disease factories, and you got to be an extra evil to say something like that and suggest something like that. You really do. You really got to be some kind of creature to suggest something like that. A critical review of measures to reduce the radioactive doses from drinking water and consumptions of freshwater foodstuff. A critical review of measures to reduce the radioactive doses from drinking water. Well, you're supposed to move everybody away. Risk of radiation exposure to the children and their mothers. Radioactivity in the air around nuclear facilities in Mexico. In fact, they actually do sex ratio studies around all test reactors, for instance. These are very low test reactors. Now, why would you do sex ratio studies around small test reactors? Because what a sex ratio study is, you're looking for more males than females to quantify a mass poisoning event. And the only reason you're going to do a study like that is because you're pretty sure that there's been a mass poisoning. And it'll show up as more males than females. And if you got more males than females, you're having less babies. So it's not just going to be humans, that's going to be all the species, see? And then Fukushima done it to the entire planet. And radionuclides transfer to fruits in the IAEA. Man, they are so evil, people, aren't they? A model for radiological consequences of nuclear power plant operational atmospheric releases. So they can legally release huge amounts every day into your environment, and they do. Canada's literally monsters. The Canadian nuclear industry, their releases from the CANDU reactors, the only way to describe it is literally as monsters, actual real-life monsters. Radio cesium and caribou reindeer in northern Canada, Alaska, and Greenland. Accident risk in nuclear power plants is never ending. It never stops emitting. The fuel pools are hemorrhaging at 24 hours a day. 238 plutonium, 239, 241 plutonium, 241 americium, 90 strontium, cesium in the soils around a nuclear research center near Prague. Well, these research are very low megawatt reactors, so why are you looking for that? In the boreal forest soils and the transfer into the wild mushrooms and berries. Berries are the most dangerous things you can eat now. That's why you're seeing all the bears with leukemias, because they eat 200,000 or 300,000 berries a day. Radioactive contamination of wild mushrooms. That's symmetrical. They're one of the few out there that are known to aggregate radiation on a scale that makes it lethal. And there's a lot of animals that like to eat mushrooms, right? And that's why they disappear quite quickly in a contaminated area. Behavior of radionuclides in soil and crop systems. Crop systems, food. The transfer of cesium from soil to plants. The Atlas of Cesium disposition of Europe after Chernobyl. Foliar absorptions, leaf fruit transfer of cesium in fruit trees. Well, it can't just be cesium, it has to be plutonium, americium, neptunium. Doses from radiocesium and 40 potassium activities found in some tobacco leaves and cigarettes. Well, the radiocesium is man-made, the potassium is natural, is harmless and innocuous. So potassium is homeostasis. Your body regulates it naturally. Your body can only consume so much potassium, right? And unless you use it up. So your body equalizes it. It regulates it like a thermostat regulates the temperature in your house, or the cruise control regulates the speed of your car. Your body, it's natural. It's stupid fucking idiot. And so anybody that puts these studies in there should automatically do 100,000 years in jail. These are disgusting parasites that do these types of studies. Solid cancers after therapeutic radiation. Therapeutic. I showed you that stuff last night. Radiation therapy. Guaranteed to fucking kill you quicker than an automobile accident. Officials, well, we're finally at the end of it, believe it or not. Officials sharply raise the radiation levels for residents to get iodine pills after the meltdown. 75 times higher in Japan than the piece of shit, scumbag, degenerate, monstrous United Nations World Health Organization recommends for children. These are friggin' monsters. Why would you raise it 75 times higher? And why ain't the people that raise the 75 times higher at least get the shit kicked out of them? Why not do that? See, these tanks at Fukushima, they were built to manipulate you. They were strictly designed to trick you and deceive you and drag you away from the reality that the tanks are empty because the buildings lost all their inventories by day fucking 6. The tanks are strictly there to fuck you over. If you fill up the tank, you can't build another tank on site. You're talking about 2.2 sieverts per liter of just beta. Supply risks fuel uranium flight to more than 16-year peak. So people are being robbed on a scale that's unimaginable right now by the uranium stocks through Sprott Physical Uranium Trust and Yellowcake Incorporation. What they done was bought a couple of years, over the last couple of years, they bought up all the physical uranium, and this created an artificial artificial demand. Because they didn't like sell it again, right? They just hang on to it. The stocks were at $30 a pound, and so immediately now the miners were saying, "Holy shit, we just sold all our uranium!" Like the stocks are rising, and so the stock market then convinced unsuspecting investors that uranium was a good buy. And then 2 weeks later, the bottom falls out and they lose their, they work for 40 or 50 years and they lose their pensions. And they rinse and recycle now for almost 13 years. But for the last 2 years in particular, like the Globe and Mail in British Columbia, it's hard to comprehend how evil they actually are. Now, this story is a good story. This story cracks me up. Nuclear hype and meltdown. The nuclear renaissance is a meltdown. bless their hearts, eh? Nuclear power went backwards last year and shrunk to below 10% of the global electricity generation. 9% or something. Despite all the hype about a new nuclear renaissance, there is none. Nuclear renaissance was a bust due to Fukushima and the catastrophic cost overruns with reactor projects. And the latest renaissance is heading the same way, nowhere. There were 5 reactor startups and 5 permanent closures in 2023 with a net loss of 1.7 gigawatts of capacity. And the ones that started up had to be shut down again because they had so many flaws. There were just 6 reactor construction starts in 2023, and 5 of them were in China. If China wasn't built it, the nuclear industry wouldn't even exist. China's the only ones keeping the nuclear industry afloat right now. Due to the aging of the reactor fleet, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is UN, which are just unbelievable scumbags. They're unbelievable how evil these people actually are. They're the people that cooked up the story that nothing got out of these fucking buildings. The International, Raphael Grossi and the rest of them. They're the people that cooked that up. The number of operable power reactors is 407 to 413, depending on the definition of operability, well down from 2002 peak of 438. Well, that's actually true, right? 407 reactors. France has reactors going off the line all the time, by the way. Small modular reactors are the subject of endless, relentless hype. There's no small modular reactor construction starts or startups last year, or the year before, or in history. Indeed, the biggest small modular reactor news in 2023 was NuScale Power's decision to abandon its flagship project in Idaho despite securing astronomical subsidies amounting to around $4 billion United States from American taxpayers. The company is far more likely to go bankrupt than to break ground on its first reactor. Think of that statement. NuScale is way more likely to go bankrupt than it ever is to break ground on a new reactor. And that is the actual truth. That is the actual facts. Liquefaction triggered by the Noto Peninsula earthquake caused extensive damage. I'm looking for that story about Niigata. Recovery measures are urgently needed not only in Ishikawa Prefecture, which is closest to the quake's epicenter, but also in Niigata and Toyama and Fukai prefectures. In Niigata prefectures, as of Sunday, more than 6,700 homes were confirmed to sustain liquefaction, folks, and other quake-related damages. Liquefaction in 6,700 homes. In Niigata. I'll bring up a map for you, actually. This is incredible. How come we only heard about this 23 days later? Well, I actually done a Chernobyl video last year or the year before, where we ran, like we done Night there, we ran through 900 studies. I mean, we ran through it. I don't know how long it took. It was like 4 hours or something. Let me see what I got here. I think we're on it. There we go. So Niigata is over here. Shika is over there. Ishikawa is over here. But Niigata is over here with 6,700 homes. They're only talking liquefaction. There's a nuclear power plant there. And that they admit spilled fuel from the fuel pools. The only way to spend fuel from the fuel pools, these friggin' buildings are built like apocalyptic shelters. that the beams that they use are so big, you can turn an SUV around in them. That's how big the beams are. Who knows what they got done over there? And they're showing you pictures like this in Niigata. You need to be friggin' worried. This is a machine that drives around using electromagnetic waves to check for underground hollows. But this is Niigata Prefecture. The Japs says they landed on the moon, but no one can be sure. Like, it's not like you can trust what they're telling you. Like, how can you trust these people when they're telling you that nothing got out of these 2 reactors? And there's 4 of these reactors that melted down and 8 fuel pools. When the entire country is trying to convince you, and has probably for the majority of the people, that nothing got out of these 2 reactors that don't exist anymore, and the 8 fuel pools. The official story is nothing got out of there. It was equal to 3 grams of sugar. This was a South Korean professor of nuclear and quantum engineering. Here's some pictures. Might as well show them. And we'll call it a night, I suppose. Ready to chew another one. A little bit off topic tonight. We went after the Chernobyl. This is, like, see all these cranes? That's only a fraction of the cranes on the site. You can't see the whole site in this picture. In fact, they have 2 of the world's biggest cranes ever built on that site. And that the material they're using it's hard to comprehend what we're talking about. But these despicable scumbags suggesting that these are resource-free, carbon-free sites, I don't know how anybody can sit in silence. I really don't get it. I don't understand. Taiwan says they're going to remove the restrictions on applying for an extensions. Scrap the rule on power and just let them have as long extensions as they want, I guess. Nuclear plants must have reapplied for operating licenses after 40 years of service within the period prescribed by the competent authorities, which is 5 years before that, so by year 35. 5 years before the reactor's service life reaches 40 years. So they want to get rid of that so the reactors that didn't apply for an extension can now have a natural extension. But the reason that you want to apply for the reactor's extension is because the reactors become brittle from gamma shines, X-rays, neutron bombardment, beta rays, alphas, and these are high pressure, 1,000 to 2,000 psi. So the last thing you want is brittle metal with that kind of pressure, right? 400 trapped around a nuclear plant for 8 days. There was I covered last night, it was 150,000 people within 30 miles. Like, nobody got onto the peninsula, nobody can get off it. Everybody was stuck there. Not 400, but everybody. Fucking hate media. I just hate media. They're nothing but degenerates. They really are degenerates, like the internet, like the atomic scientists. My God, these are disgusting parasites. Oh, well, sometimes you gotta get it off your fucking chest anyway. I guess tonight's one of those times. If it wasn't, well, it's too late now. Let's close the poll down before I snap. Should nuclear scientists that work at nuclear meltdowns in Fukushima instead of the homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language? We got a resounding yes, man. Thank you, everybody, for participating in that. That's awesome. Yeah, it's because that's who's working there is the homeless and the destitute. Not nuclear academics, not nuclear corporations, not nuclear universities, not nuclear students, but the homeless and the victims of society. So let's do a shout out tonight. We haven't done a shout out in quite a long time. Do a shout out for Stephen Young right away in case he's out there, because I know it's hard for him to type. Sue Sprain, hi Sue, thank you. Blue Jay, Albert, Port Angeles, Kevin Blanche, Richard, James Lucet, hi everybody. No Dark Side of the Moon, no. I know the last 3 or 4 shows my computer that I do the external, like the chat room and that onto, is really slow. If I misses anybody's name, my apologies. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. A great day tomorrow. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you made it this far into the madness. This is another night, like the last night of madness. I'm pretty sure that's the end of it for another 7 or 8 months for me. Dana Nasana. Hi, Dana. Peace, wear. Good night, everybody. Vast Thinker. Every once in a while, I got to remember to do these shoutouts because I really do like doing the shoutouts. You can almost see me calm down as I do the shoutout, can't you? Isn't that weird? But my computer is just, it can't handle these, just the last 3 or 4 shows has been doing that to me. 239 Joint, that's Joe. Hi, Joe. Joe been poisoned, officially poisoned by radiation when he was young. And he suffers from some seriously debilitating illnesses from that poison, which was around, I believe, Rocky Flats, actually. And just almost something in the water. John Shiflett. I'm almost through the comment sections. I'm going backwards up through the comments. I'll come to the most recent comments in a second. Just a quick shout out to everybody to kill the last couple of minutes. Mark Rogro. Hi, Mark. Turkey Doctor. Turkey Doctor? Oh, there's Stephen Young. Hi, Stephen. Hello, my friend. Stephen's been around a long time. Holy shit, eh? Quite a few of you people have been around a very long time, actually. Colette. Hi, Colette. I probably missed 1 or 2 people. Whenever I do shout-outs, no matter how hard I try, I always seem to miss a couple of people. Yeah, you're welcome, Port Angeles. Just make sure I got as many people as I could. I wonder what they're doing in the nuclear industry to fuck up my computer for the last 3 days. Anyway, let's play this clip before I go away.
Something too on the meter, just to mention, even though I spent all this time right next to the reactors, I received more radiation on my transcontinental flights from Tokyo to Washington than I did at the reactor site. So I tried to use that in terms of, yeah, the meters went off scale, but it's not that it was off scale. I didn't stay there that long.